Okay, I didn't originally plan on making this video, but just due to the time-sensitive nature, I felt it's something that I had to quickly cover. So, as you know, cities across the world are trying to give people more options to get around that aren't just driving. But in case you aren't already aware, leaked documents from Doug Ford's government show that they're considering banning the creation of bike infrastructure if it would reduce car lanes in any way. I'll explain in a moment why this is really dumb, but first it's important to understand that cities that have connected networks of protected bike infrastructure make cycling an effective option to get around. These cities don't experience as much congestion as people have options to get around that don't involve driving. Imagine if cars were only able to drive on like 20% of the roads. It would probably affect the amount of people that choose to drive. Our bike networks are the same way. Dangerous routes create high levels of traffic stress and are not viable options for most people. When you don't have a protected network of bike infrastructure, people won't rely on it as much, limiting its usage. As cities expand and connect their networks, usage does increase. So seeing Ford's government attempt to prevent cities from completing their networks is extremely disappointing, especially when their own internal reports are saying that this policy will likely have no impact on traffic congestion.
In those the government internal documents that we have, one of the risks that is pointed to in that advice to your government that it actually may not decrease congestion at all.
No, it's a bunch of hogwash.
This move is simply populism in action, passing a policy that is popular with uninformed voters that will work against their own interests. This is not going to make congestion better. By denying meaningful alternatives to driving, it'll only ensure driving gets worse, wasting more people's time in traffic and creating more crashes. While we're not sure yet if this policy will be a blanket ban, Ford has argued that bike lanes don't belong on major roads.
Side streets, that's what you do. You don't clog up traffic.
So it's possible this might only affect arterial roads. You actually see this argument with a lot of people that aren't against bike lanes, just not on the major roads.
Not because we're against bike lanes at all, but we just feel that they're not being put in the right places. Why would you want to put cyclists on the busiest streets when there are alternative streets that cyclists could use much more safely?
But here's also why this doesn't make any sense. Major roads are the most direct way to get through a city. This is true whether you're in a bus, car, or a bike. Cars, however, are an extremely ineffective way at moving large amounts of people, which creates the congestion that this government is trying to get rid of. Transit and bike lanes are just able to significantly move a lot more people using less space, yet we seem to accept that the current allocation of space that predominantly favors inefficient personal vehicles is the best way to do this. That any change from this will be a regression. This line of thinking is known as status quo bias, a belief that prefers the familiar over the unfamiliar. But the benefits of protected cycling infrastructure isn't unfamiliar. As mentioned earlier, cities across the world that have protected networks of bike infrastructure are in fact able to give more people the opportunity to get around without having to get stuck in traffic. Here in the Netherlands, I couldn't help but notice that protected bike infrastructure is pretty much always located on major streets. These major arterial roads sometimes only ever have one lane per traffic in direction, with a lot of the space being dedicated to trams, trees, sidewalks, and of course, protected bike infrastructure. These protected bike lanes run from these wider areas even into the denser parts of the city center. I never have to check a map to see where the bike lanes are. I could just rely on the fact that I know that safe protected infrastructure will be there. In some ways, these arterial roads are actually the best way to get around in the city, as they often have the best infrastructure. Side streets and local roads are okay, but they're circuitous, hard to follow, and they're best suited for short, local trips within the neighborhood or for the last mile. Removing this massive barrier to cycling is one of the key reasons why cycling rates are so high in the Netherlands, and adopted by so many people across all ages, genders, and socioeconomic statuses. This misguided belief that keeping our major roads looking like this is somehow doing a great job at moving people is absolutely ridiculous. Hogwash, if you may. We know that adding driving lanes has no impact on reducing travel times, as it just induces additional demand on the road. The same also works in reverse. Removing vehicular capacity leads to traffic evaporation, where demand for this road reduces, returning to similar traffic congestion as before. And if you use that space to provide for other modes of transportations like bike infrastructure, we even see improvements. If you happen to live in Ontario, especially in a Conservative riding, please write to your MPP and also the Minister for Transportation and tell them you want actual options to get around and not to take away cities' abilities to improve their own roads for their own residents. For anyone else, keep these points in mind the next time someone tries to tell you that we can't change our streets because it'll just make congestion worse. Because is this really the best we can do?